Hi, it's Cappy from Always in Stitches in Noblesville, Indiana. I'm so excited to have you on our YouTube channel. If you've been following along, you know that I have offered to do a little bit of an opportunity to do some English paper piecing. We are doing a program called M50 Mystery, and in that you're going to have leftover fabric scraps. And whether you're doing that or not, this is a great opportunity to learn how to use up those odds and ends of fabric. So we've already had one video that kind of showed you how to choose fabric, how to cut, the beginning process of how to glue those things together. Now I'm going to talk about some of the tools that you need and actually show you some of the stitching that you're going to do in order to make your little hexagons or whatever shape you English paper piece hold together in a way that will last forever. So we're going to go to the table here and watch what it takes to sew these things together and make it happen. So we're going to start. I'm working this time with just 1-inch hexagons, and this is
about there.
Right about here. Okay.
Yep.
I'm working with 1-inch hexagons. These are kind of the, oh my gosh, I'd call them the basic every shape you could probably use again and again. If you buy 2.5-inch mini charms, it makes a perfect 1-inch hexagon. And this is just the basic standard, I think, when you see English paper piecing. A lot of people start with a 1-inch hexie. So that's why I have these. These are actually fabric scraps that I just sit and glue up. Someday my vision is to have these all made into just a random quilt of all the little squares of fabric that I have left over. It's fun to feature things. I showed you last time how when you pick specific patterns you can put things together so that you have a repeating pattern, which makes for interesting designs when you put things together to show how things have multiplicity as far as creating how things come together and make fun, interesting designs. That's one of the fun things about it. It feels like you're painting with fabric. And featuring little pieces off of the quilt, you know, so that little piece there that I featured in it makes it interesting. And the reason that's fun, I'm going to show you on a bigger piece here. These are big hexies, so hexies again are kind of the standard. For instance, these 3 pieces, when I put them together, I get a secondary pattern right here that makes this more interesting. So that's part of the reason we play with hexagons, and you can do fun things by featuring the designs in them. But once you are ready to sew your hexies together and you've cut your fabric out and created your design, you're going to need some things. First of all, you're going to need the actual hexagon papers that you use to put in the back here. And this is just a little piece of cardstock that you can buy pre-cut. I like to buy mine pre-cut. I don't particularly like to have to cut them out. They're inexpensive. They'll come in a bag of plenty, and they're easy to make and use. I love them. I can't tell you how many boxes of hexies I've got, but I use them all the time. So they're pre-cut, which makes it easy, and then I know they're consistent. A lot of times you'll see people will take just their own cardstock and make their own. There's nothing wrong, no harm, no foul. But I've already glued these down with my glue stick. So this is a glue pen, fabric glue pen that is really very good for this because the glue doesn't stay forever. It dries clear, it is water soluble, and once you put it in, it's not forever always. These are going to peel off. You'll see, for instance, in this one, I've already taken the fabric out, the cardstock out, and I'll be able to reuse that if I want to, because once you've sewn them together, you remove that card out of the center. And these glue pens come with a refill. So we have a complete kit that you can buy that has everything in it, but I'm going to show you the individual items because you may already have these in your supplies and you may not have to buy more. So this is the glue pen that you want to use. And then you want a specific type of needle. You'll hear an applique needle or a straw needle. Sometimes it's called a beading needle. There's lots of different descriptions for it. We particularly like the ones by Traditional Primitives. Missy Carpenter, this is a number 11 needle. This is the one she uses for English paper piecing. I have to agree with Missy. This is probably my most favorite. And the reason that we like these needles is they're super fine. And I feel certain you can't see that on the screen, but they are just the thinnest needles, but they're made in a way that they're very, very strong. And part of the reason you want such a thin needle is because you really want to get between the fibers when you make your stitches. So the needle matters. There are several options as far as needles. I would suggest you try them to find the one you like, but I wouldn't hesitate one bit to start with Missy's. I think you'll really like those going in. Primitive Gatherings makes one. There's Sue Daly makes them. There's all kinds of needles to use. And then the other thing that you're going to have are these little sew-tight magnets. These are awesome because you want to hold your pieces together when you are getting ready to sew them. And it's really hard to use binder clips or anything else because they get in the way. So if I'm going to sew, for instance, these two pieces together right here, I want to match these sides like this. I'm going to take this magnet and I'm going to put it on either side, and that holds the edges together. So while I'm sewing, I don't have to be fussing with whether those pieces are shifting or not. So these sew-tight magnets are a dream. These are a little less heavy. The purple ones are very heavy duty. I've got an assortment of some. Tula Pink makes some, Sue Daly makes them. There's lots of magnets available out there. But the binder clips, which I used for a long time, when you're sewing, your thread catches on them. So I strongly recommend that you get some magnets. The other thing you'll notice I have sticking on my finger here is a little thimble. When you're pushing that thread and needle through this fabric, it can really do a number on that finger. So there's a couple that we like, specifically this one from the Superior Thread Company. This is a thimble pack, and you'll see that it has these little ridges, and that's what I like because it catches my needle. They do make some others that are slippery. It just depends on what works for you. Or if you're used to working with a thimble, whatever thimble you like on that finger is going to help you. I suggest the easiest thing to do is do some English paper piecing. Whichever finger gets abused, that's the finger you want to put the thimble on. I had a hard time working with a thimble until I found these little dots, and these helped me not avoid the finger. What happened was when I put a thimble on my finger, I would have a tendency to not use that finger, and then it didn't help me. So, but this works real well for me. And this little adhesive pad on here, there's just a little sticky pad, and it just sticks and re-sticks and stays. So, love that. And then there's another method of basting your pieces together. Again, this is a Missy Carpenter process. It's called a starch basting technique. You're going to use starch, you're going to have a little pin, you're going to have a little mat, and you're going to have a little iron. And we do carry the supplies for you to do this technique. I love it. There's also a little stiletto that you need. I would suggest you go to Missy Carpenter's website, look up Traditional Primitives. Just Google her. She has some wonderful training on how to use this technique. I really, really, really like this technique. It gets you a very clean finish and a very sharp edge and very, very accurate piecing. So especially when you're matching specific patterns, this way of doing it is great. I will caution you, if you want to do it, you must have this particular iron from Clover, because you have to have an iron that gets as hot as the sun in order for this technique to work. And this one gets just about that hot. So if you're going to be doing the starch basting technique instead of the glue basting technique, I love this way of doing it. So that gives you some choices more than just the way that I showed you initially. But let's talk a little bit about how we're going to do this. Thread. Let's talk about thread. Here's my thread collection that I work with when I'm doing English paper piecing. You want a thin weight thread. So typically a spool of thread is anywhere from 50 to 40 weight thread that you're doing when you're stitching with a sewing machine or doing your piecing on a sewing machine. But or even if you're hand quilting, you're going to be using a heavy thread. But when you're English paper piecing, you want a very, very fine thread, 80 weight or finer. And I have several choices in here, depending on what I'm working with and how I feel that day. This one is actually a 80 weight poly thread. And if you are a heavy hand, you might want to use a polyester thread rather than a cotton, because it has a little stronger pull on it. I don't like the poly threads just because I kind of want everything to be cotton. It's just my brain thinks that way. I don't think it matters either way. But I do like the Aurifil cotton threads. This particular container that I have for mine is a K. Buckley, and what's really cool about it is whatever thread, if you can see, the thread is in here and it just rolls, and I just pull it out and then my thread doesn't get tangled, and then I cut off the piece of thread that I want to use, as long as, well, if it was zipped, as long as I need it to be, and then I cut that off like that, and then it just sticks out. So it's just a nice way to store thread, especially if you're changing colors all the time. There is not a single thing wrong with using grayish beige threads on everything you English paper piece. That's perfectly acceptable. Sometimes, though, I like to have the colors just because it's a fun little option. You know, we like to collect things. I like thread. So that's my thread. Now I'm going to put this right here so you can see. This needle is eensy weensy teensy tiny, and so is the thread, and that's why you have to have what you have to get this to work, as far as being able to thread it. This is a real test. Can I thread it? Yes, it's going to go right through. I think that's the hardest part, is threading your needle. The temptation is to use a super long thread so you don't have to rethread and rethread, but that's not going to work, because then you're going to be pulling too far against where you've made your stitch. So I've pulled that piece of thread through my eye of my needle, which is very small, and I'm going to pull it. And you can see it's about from my fingertip to my elbow. So if you're measuring, it's about that long. And what we do with this is a very tiny slip stitch. Now, I've magnetized my two pieces together, and I start on a straight line edge here. And when I'm taking the fabric up, when I'm actually stitching, my first stitch, you notice I didn't put a knot in my thread. And I'm going to teach you how to do what's called a knicker knot, or I call it a knotty knot. Sue Daly does this technique. Lots of English paper pieces use this technique. But what I do is, when I start, I'm going to start on one side, and I just want to take literally just one thread off of the edge, and I don't know how well you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can see it fairly well. But I'm just going to take just a single thread, quite literally. When I glued this down, there's a little gap between the edge of the fabric and the edge of the paper. And I'm getting in between those two, so when I'm going through the fabric, I am not catching that paper at all. And I'm going to go through both sides, both edges, so my needle is exactly perpendicular to the fabric. Is it visible, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't tell what I can see and what we can't.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going right perpendicular, and I'm going to pull that all the way through, and I'm going to catch that thread. Maybe if I flip this over. Here, let's lay this black down. I bet it shows against the black better than, because my thread matches. Oh yeah, there we go. So I'm going to pull that thread all the way through until there's just a tail hanging out back there. And I'm going to take my finger and hold that tail down. And then I'm going to come through again in the same, just barely a littlest bit over from there. And I'm going to pull it through again, just to kind of make one little loop. Now that's not locked yet, it's just loose in there, and I'm holding this tail. So now that I've made that beginning stitch, I'm going to come back again, because I want this particular corner, these corners, all these corners are going to be weak. So I want to really be sure I get a good catch on that corner. And I'm only going to push my needle through just that much. Just the littlest bit. Now I have a thread coming out the tail of the needle, and I have the thread that came through the first time. I'm going to take that thread and go to one side, and then I'm going to take the other thread and go to the other side. So one goes to the left, one goes to the right. And it doesn't matter which one you choose, just so one goes left, one goes right. And then I'm going to pull that through again, and that has now made a knot. And that knot is one of the strongest knots you'll ever have. It's amazing to me how strong this knot is. I have started using this knot on everything I sew, on my bindings, on anything I do, rather than doing a quilter's knot where you wrap it and tie it at the end, because I don't want that lump, especially in English paper piecing. I don't want little knots on my corners. So I've locked that corner, it's good and secure, and now I'm going to stitch all the way across here. And I'm going to continue the same process of just taking just a nibble of fabric off of each side with my needle parallel, or perpendicular, I mean, to the two pieces of cardstock and fabric, and I'm going to pull that through. And this is just a continuing stitch where all I'm doing is just pulling that up, and I'm going to stitch. The temptation is sometimes to make these stitches so tiny that they almost don't move. So if you look at how big say 12 stitches to the inch are in a sewing machine, you really want about the same distance. So I don't want to get these too close, but I want them close enough that there's not going to be a gap. And I'm just going to real quickly sew down that entire edge. Now here's what's fun. I've gotten to where I've done enough of these now that I don't even think about the process of the stitching. I just stitch it. And all of a sudden, I'm all the way around a piece of fabric, and it's happened pretty quick. So if you've seen some of my other videos, I did a Tula Pink, Tula Nova is what it's called, and it's a really big English paper piece finished product. I had so much fun doing it, and it turned out just lovely. And I couldn't believe how quickly it actually went, even with these little stitches. The other thing that's really nice is this is very transportable. I can take this, you know, all these little hexagons, a little spool of thread, a little bit out with me, get on a plane, nobody thinks twice, and I can sit and stitch a whole stack of hexagons in no time at all. So you can see this goes pretty quick. And my stitches are not super close. I'd say they're, oh, maybe 1/16 of an inch, 32nd of an inch, just the littlest bit apart. And I'm just going to do that continuing. Now, because my stitch when I take the needle through is parallel, and then I take the next one, the stitches run at a little bit of an angle when you look at them. And that's fine, that's what we want. But the goal is for these two pieces to lay flat when I open them up. We don't want them to be on top of each other or laying so close together that they can't open. So there has to be a little bit of ease. You don't want to pull that stitch so tight that the fabric can't move. And I also want to avoid catching the paper, because every time I catch the paper, that makes a hole in my paper, which means it's going to have not integrity to reuse it, because you can reuse these papers, oh gosh, until they disintegrate. When you are doing the starch basting method, you will also be able to reuse your papers, and you have to have kind of specific papers for that. So if you're going to do the starch basting technique, you're going to want to have a little different cardstock in there because the starch won't hold up. Okay, so now I've gone down that whole corner. I'm down to a point again, and so at that point, I'm again going to do my knotty knot. So I've pulled my needle through. It's just laying perpendicular. I'm going to take one thread to the left, the back thread to the right, and I'm going to pull that needle through. And that's given me my knotty knot, and it's secure. Okay, so at this point, if I was done stitching, I could cut my thread, scissors here. I could cut my thread, and I'm going to cut those pretty tight. I'm going to trim this little piece off here. And then I'm going to open this up. And when I've done it well and done it right, and if I used probably a different color, they're just barely visible. Now, there is a movement among, that is, these stitches, sometimes you want them to be seen. You've spent a lot of time doing those little stitches. But if you do them well and you do them right, they'll be almost invisible. And when you get a whole quilt, you can see that they won't show. So that's our stitching technique. That's the thread that you're going to use. That's the magnets that you need. After I've glued all my pieces together, and I'm ready to start stitching, then I can assemble these in whatever pattern I want. Now I'm going to teach you how to make all these and put them together to do a pin cushion, and that'll be the next part of our thing. I'm going to show you a partially made pin cushion that you can use to these hexagons and make a quick little easy project. But you can see how these just get addictive. Now if I'm sewing, so if I would typically not have disconnected my thread, and I would have sewn this part, and then I would have attached this one and gone here, and then depending on how I'm sewing them all together, I might put another one and sew here, and then put another one and sew here, and then my next one and sew here. So I'm going to try and sew all the way around one, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to put these together, and I'm going to start sewing each side. So I usually try to work all the way around a piece and then work my way out in spokes from there. No right or wrong. Sometimes people like to just zigzag along. The goal is to get the seams where you want them. And I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference how you sew them, but I like to go all the way around a piece because then when that piece is sewn all the way around, I can take that paper out. So that's where we're going to stop this week, and then next time we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to make these into a fun little project. So post your comments and your ideas about how much fun you're having doing this, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.